Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining me. My name is Michael, and we are starting the next book in our series of reading the book of Exodus. It gives the story of Moses, the freedom of the Jews from the slavery of the Egyptians, and many, many other things to follow. But just as a quick background, in my book, before the beginning of it, there's an introduction written by somebody. It doesn't really actually say who it was written by, but somebody just gives like an introduction to each of the books. So I'll give this a read real quick, and then we'll get into our first three chapters in the book of Exodus. Exodus contains 40 chapters, so it'll take us a few weeks to get through all of this, God willing, and with my temperance, being able to continuously get into this every day without life happening, as we know that it does happen. But don't worry and don't be alarmed or disheartened, for we will get through each one of these books through God's own time. When He sees fit, we'll get it done and then go from there. I'm still curious about what's going to happen after we get done. When I get done doing all the recordings of all the Bible, what's going to be the next journey, adventure. So anyways, here's an introduction to Exodus. The background: Exodus, like the rest of the Pentateuch, is best understood to have been written primarily by Moses. The date of Exodus is debated, but a common view is that the Exodus occurred around 1446 BC. Roughly 350 years has passed since the end of Genesis. The 70 Israelites who went to Egypt have grown into a great multitude and are facing terrible oppression under a new Pharaoh. The first half of the book of Exodus focuses on the exodus of the people of Israel out of Egypt, and the second half of the events at Mount Sinai and the content of the law revealed to Moses. The key theme for this is the overarching theme of Exodus is the fulfillment of God's promises to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The book emphasizes the faithfulness and the prayerfulness of Moses, God's appointed leader, but focuses just as much on God's grace to Moses and to Israel. I won't get into a continuing of that. It's just a quick little introduction so you understand, although Exodus is probably one of the more famous of the books of the Bible, primarily because there's been so many movies and shows and whatnot made because of it. I don't believe. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that one, but so most of you probably already know Exodus fairly well, but still, nonetheless, we want to get this put in there for those who do not, for those who are hearing this for the first time, or maybe don't know the entire story of Moses, the release of the Jews from the Egyptians, their descent back into their own pridefulness, as God had already released them and then decided, we want to do it our own way. And God punishes them for that, sending them into the wilderness for 40 years. But anyways, getting a little ahead of myself here. So we'll go ahead and get started. This is the book of Exodus, chapter 1. Israel increases greatly in Egypt. These are the names of the sons of Israel, Jacob, who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad. I don't know why I want to. It's like a Ghad is how I want to pronounce it, but it's Gad. Gad and Asher. All the descendants of Jacob's were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Now There arose a new king over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with the heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh's store cities, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves, and made their lives bitter with hard service, and mortar and brick, and all kinds of work in the field. And all their work they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah, and the other Puah, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him, but if it is a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God, and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives, and said to them, Why have you done this, and let the male children live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwives comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, Every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. Chapter 2. The birth of Moses. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. A woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes, and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in and placed it among the reeds by the river bank, and his sister stood at the distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of the Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds, and sent her servant woman, and she took it. And she opened it. She saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him, and said, This is one of the Hebrew children. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, because she said, I drew him out of the water. Now one day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together, and he said to the man in the wrong, Why do you strike your companion? He answered, Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid, and thought, Surely the thing is known. When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh, and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them, and watered their flock. When they came home to their father Reuel, he said, How is it that you have come home so soon today? They said, An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and even drew water for us and watered the flock. He said to his daughters, Then where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. She gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. Now during those many days the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Chapter 3. The Burning Bush. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire, but out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near. Take your sandals off of your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land, to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptian oppressed them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to the Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you, that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Then Moses said to God, If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Say this to the people of Israel, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, and the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you in what has been done to you in Egypt, and I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice, and you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Now please let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that he will let you go, and I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And when you go, you shall not go empty, but each woman shall ask of her neighbor, and any woman who lives in her house, for silver and gold jewelry, and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and your daughters, so you shall plunder the Egyptians. So that is going to be the end of our reading this morning. As you can see, what's actually written in the Bible and what you may actually see in some movies are not depicted accurately. There is nothing in here that shows Ramses, who becomes the Pharaoh that Moses goes back to, as being a close brother, as is depicted in like the Charlton Heston original Moses movie, written like I think in the mid-60s. Many of the Moses movies, like there's no actual written scripture showing that they were close, that they were friends. So you got to be careful in how you watch TV and what's portrayed on TV, because deception comes in many different forms. Deception and deceivement comes in ways that look good, that make you feel good, or that may try to think to give you a better understanding, but in fact it's misleading and deceiving. Simply put, at Moses, he grew, he defended his people, he killed an Egyptian, and he fled for fear of the Pharaoh because he was mad and wanted to kill him. And so he left. It doesn't say anything about being cast out, being sent out, that Moses was a prince of Egypt, as the animated movie shows as Prince of Egypt, or anything in that nature. Now, whether or not there's historical fact to it, I am not aware, but what I read is what's written in the Bible, and what's written in the Bible is true. It's God's word, and that's what I go by. I don't go by man's understanding or man's written understanding of anything. So yeah, that's just me personally. Take with it what you would like. But it, Book of Exodus moves pretty quickly through this. We'll be coming to see in the next few chapters Moses coming back to Egypt, talking to Pharaoh, telling him to let his people go, and you'll see that Pharaoh's heart gets hardened. He's already not wanting to let them go. Or if they let him go, that's millions of Israelites who are working their city, and if they're gone, then who's going to work their city and do their things? So you see the punishment that comes afterwards. But I do thank you for joining me today. I love you. God bless you, and I hope you have a wonderful week.